thinking, but I want you to know that we have choices. Hi, everybody. Helen here from Positive Space, and tonight is going to be a very special night. I have a very dear friend of mine who is a Long Island transplant. She is in South Carolina, and she has very graciously and generously decided to be on the show. What I'd like to tell you before I introduce her, this is Debbie Phillips. She survived triple negative breast cancer, had a double mastectomy, and she not only dealt with her health crisis, but she also was an ultimate caregiver to her husband, Stephen Phillips, who was a big teddy bear of a man. And I want to talk about her breast cancer. And then I want to go over to being a caregiver, because for the past few episodes, I haven't really talked about caregivers, and they are so integral in helping us heal and move forward that Debbie is the perfect person to talk to. I also want to thank her because she talked me off the ledge so many times when I was going through my treatment. And I don't know if you remember, of course, but during my treatment was during COVID. And during COVID, not many people could come and visit me. I had some family that came in, but my core four on Long Island, and Debbie, who was in South Carolina, she's coming back, I hope. She and these three other women who are breast cancer survivors or cancer survivors, they helped me out. And they brought me food, and they talked to me on the phone. And when I would call Deb late at night, she would stay on the phone with me for hours, just talking me off the ledge and telling me it was going to be okay. So I want to read a little bit about her. Steve passed away 7 years ago. 7 years ago. And if you see that picture up right there, she is indeed an angel. And 7 years ago, he passed away. And 2.5 years later, she was diagnosed with her own health challenge. Now, think about that. While she is grieving that she's lost her husband, she has to go through all the stuff that entails breast cancer, surgery, radiation. No, Deb, you didn't do radiation, did you? Hey, how you doing?
Hi.
Hi. Did you do radiation?
I did not need radiation. No, thankfully, yes.
Okay, that's true. I'm trying to remember. And yeah. I want you to also know that she is, first of all, Debbie Phillips, I love you. Mwah, 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 mwah. I can't wait to see you in person.
I know. But
she also volunteers at the Novant Cancer Center in South Carolina, where she counsels breast cancer patients, their families, caregivers, and also she even has been a shoulder to lean on for oncology nurses. And if you want to tell me that's not giving back, I don't know what is. So come on back, Deb. Where'd you go? Oh, I love that picture. Hey, where's Anna? First of all, hi, Anna. Thank you. That is my producer for the evening. I cannot forget her. She is awesome. So hi, Anna. How you doing tonight?
Hi.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, Anna. How are you? I always say thank you to her because she's always very kind to me when I call her with, like, I think I'm doing this right. So always a thank you to you because you're awesome as well. Now,
thank you. You guys pleasure. Are awesome too. Like, Debbie, very nice to meet you, and
my
I can't
pleasure.
wait. I can't wait to hear more of your story and learn a lot more about the subject. So
thank you. I appreciate being here. So thank you for inviting me.
We go back. Deb
oh my gosh.
Go back. Don't say it. Don't you say it. We go back decades. We'll just leave it at that. We go back decades. Now, to take that a step even further, we grew up together as we were under 10. So that's where I'm leaving it. And that's where
I'm leaving
it. Yeah. That's
4 houses away.
4 houses away. Yes, absolutely. And I'm still here. You're in my kitchen tonight. So welcome to my kitchen, everybody.
I love it.
Well, it's looking pretty neat from there. I did have a background up, but the background fell down, and the background now is in the living room because the animals, 2 cats and a dog, will traipse all over it. So now you're in my kitchen. So it is what it is. But let's get to the moment at hand now. Now, Deb, Okay. Um, how was the cancer initially detected?
For myself,
Yes, for you.
there was a lot of discrepancy in my original treatment. I actually had gone for my normal mammogram, which I almost did not do. It was the end of the year, and I had been following up yearly mammogram. I had to do sonograms because I was very cystic and I had what was considered dense tissue. So for women out there, when you do have your mammogram, you will see on the bottom of that report that it will say that it is about 97% accurate and not always close if you have dense tissue. Dense tissue is very hard to see and feel into it. Now, the joke used to be, wow, you have dense tissue, you have very young breasts. So I always thought that was a great thing. So it turned out it wasn't such a great thing. I had my mammogram. Correct. That's excellent. I love that. Thank you for showing that for the women, because we need to be more attuned to these reports, to our bodies. When I found my cancer, it took about almost 2 months to actually diagnose me properly.
Really?
Because I was called back for biopsies, which was not unusual for me, being cystic, dense. So I said, no problem. We did stereotactic core biopsy. I had surgical clips placed. Again, not unusual for me. I've had them before. And I really wasn't concerned. It was a normal treatment course for me because of my type of tissue. Unfortunately, the biopsy showed that I had something suspicious in my left breast. And strangely, when they called me back, they said, well, the good news is it's not cancer. I said, well, that is good news. But it was something called a radial scar, which can mimic cancer. So they do like to have it removed. Correct. And although it says radial scar, it's really not a scar. It's just the description of this abnormal tissue. But you don't want to leave it there, and it's best to remove it. And they said, we're also seeing something a little off just below that. We'd like you to see a surgeon. You probably need lumpectomy. Great. I do that. Surgeon says, okay, well, I'd like to send you for an MRI of both breasts so that I can assess the surgical area. Because as you might know, with lumpectomy, you are removing tissue. And the doctor wanted to know what my defect would be. Do we need to remove it as one, or do we need to make 2 separate incisions? In having this MRI of both breasts, the MRI picks up something suspicious in my right breast now, the other side. So they called me and said, you're going to need biopsies. Now I'm almost a little aggravated. And I say, but I've had the biopsies. And now they say, well, you're going to need more in your right breast now. So I say, could I possibly need lumpectomies in both breasts? And they say, it happens. So we go back. I have the MRI of the breast. The surgeon says, depending on what the radiologist sees, he may decide to biopsy. So as I see them getting the biopsy equipment ready, I realize, okay, there's more question here. He's going to biopsy it. We do that, and I get a call at my job, and she said, can you come in? We need to talk. So I knew at that time something was questionable. And I said, well, feel free to tell me what it is. I am familiar. And she told me I had breast cancer. And now it was breast cancer in my right breast, not the original breast that was questionable. They initially thought that it was a small, possibly 5 millimeter, maybe stage 0, stage 1. But I did need to see the oncologist. When I received that call initially, I was more concerned for my children and my family because I had just lost my husband 2 years and several months prior to colon cancer. Mm-hmm. I questioned it so much so that I said to a coworker, I have to leave and go home. And he said, are you okay? I said, I have breast cancer. And he said, of course he was so flustered and, oh my gosh, are you okay to drive? And of course I was. But on my drive home, I called the radiology facility back and I spoke to the same nurse who is actually She is more of a dedicated nurse to cancer patients. So she was assigned to me, and she would help me through my process now of my cancer surgeries and some appointments. I asked her, "Are you sure about this diagnosis? Because I cannot have any question. I have to go home and tell my children and my family. And we're not even recovered from, and not even that it's a matter of recovery, but we hadn't even felt sure-footed after losing Stephen. Stephen meant everything to us." And she said, "No, we do have 2 pathologies. Look, and it is definitely cancer." Okay, so I call my oldest sister-in-law on my husband's side. My husband was one of 8, a wonderful family. They are my siblings as well, and I'm very fortunate to have them. So I call the oldest sibling, and she was silent. And I said, "Susan, did you hear what I said? I have breast cancer." And she said, I can't even respond. And she said, "Do you want me to call everyone else?" I said, "Yes, I'm on my way to tell my children." So what transpired after that is, when I met with oncology, normally the usual course with triple negative breast cancer is to do treatment first of chemo, then surgery, then radiation. But because there was such a discrepancy in sizing and my diagnosing, and the fact that we really couldn't feel well enough due to the dense tissue, it was advised to me to have surgery first. And I was okay with that, because the way the oncologist explained it is, if we had that surgical pathology, it will allow me to treat you properly. Because if we just guess, she could either over-treat me with chemo or under-treat me. Either one of those options would have had bad outcomes. So I was all for it. I knew in my heart that I would want the double mastectomy. I had dealt with some patients through the years when I worked for an OBGYN, and I was somewhat familiar. I used to chart the radiology reports. I was familiar with some of the terminology, which I felt helped me. But I knew in my heart that I was going at this as aggressively as possible. And I chose the mastectomy. And thankfully, in doing that, we were able to get most of my breast tissue. And when I first received the call from the surgeon, and she said to me, "Do you understand the type of cancer you have?" And I said, "In what way?" And she said, "You have triple negative." Now, I had never heard of triple negative. Most of the patients I'm familiar with, and some family members through marriage, had dealt with estrogen positive cancers. So I'm thinking, well, okay, this has to be great news. It's triple negative, whatever the heck we don't want it to be, right? And I say, "Okay, so is that a good thing?" And she said, "No, it is a more rare and aggressive cancer, and only 1 in 10 patients will have that type of cancer." And I thought to myself, okay, not only do I have breast cancer, but now I have this rare, aggressive cancer, which made me certainly more anxious about moving forward with my treatment. And it was just, it kind of blew me away. And I was familiar with my husband's disease and treatments for him, but I wasn't really, having triple negative brought a whole new host of questions. And I called that doctor that I worked for so many years, and I said, "You're not going to believe this. I've been diagnosed with breast cancer, and it's triple negative." And she said, "Really? Like, they told you that?" I said, "Yes, it's triple negative." And what happened was, I actually had 2 different types of cancer in the right breast. And the initial diagnosis of 5 millimeters really ended up being an almost 3-centimeter tumor, which just cut me off from being in clinical trials. If you're 3 centimeters and over, you're a candidate for clinical trials. Being 2.8 centimeters put me right before it. And the interesting thing with triple negative, which I found, it does interest me anyway, but what was very interesting is there is no targeted treatment for triple negative cancer.
Really?
Really. And that blew me away because when my husband was ill, they spoke a lot of targeted treatments for colon cancer. Mm-hmm. And it had to do with these genetic makeups of the tumors. Unfortunately, Stephen was positive for this one particular gene, which he was not a candidate then for these 3 targeted drugs. So usually a cancer will have a targeted drug. This one has worked best for colon or rectal. Triple negative does not have a targeted treatment. So they use the same treatments that they use for the other breast cancers, which are very similar, and words you will be familiar with. And it was adriamycin, Taxol, and they treat them with that same medication. And there is no follow-up in the same sense that there is for other cancers. We don't have PET scans. We don't have routine scans.
Really?
Yes. And it's an interesting thing. And if triple negative were to return, it usually does return in either the breast area. Some people have reported through their scar, or it tends to go to another spot like pelvis, hip. And it just blew me away that I had this cancer that I'd never heard of and doesn't have a targeted treatment. So we're doing what?
Well, let me ask you, Deb, you explained that phenomenally. Thank you so much. Now, okay, so you've got the diagnosis and now you decided to have a double mastectomy, right?
Correct. Yes.
How did that go? How did that go?
Actually, it went better than I expected. Mm-hmm. I was scared going into it. As you know, you hear all kinds of stories. And unfortunately, when you are diagnosed with cancer, and I don't mean this in any negative way at all, but it always seems, and my surgeon had said to me, you'll see that your next door neighbor's mother's aunt's friend had this, and this is what happened. So, you really can get caught up in that. So I had decided not to do that to myself. And what I did was, with the help of my doctor, you basically, and you don't realize you're doing that, but you're forming your healthcare team. So I went to not being from here, the doctor asked me, do you have a surgeon? I said, I'm not from here. And, in some conversation with family, it was thought maybe I should head back to New York for treatment. I thought, hey, I could go back. I love Stephen's oncologist, was a phenomenal man. I can just go back. And I said, no, I want to stay in my home for treatment. And I wanted to stay near my children who were both living here at that time. So I gathered a healthcare team with the help of each doctor. The surgeon, I had to pick a plastic surgeon. And my surgeon gave me 3 doctors. And I told her I do have issues with scarring and keloid. So that was very important to me. The mastectomy is hard to, it's hard to describe. I went into it very confident, and I said, I knew in my heart, this is what I needed to do. After having it, being a woman, it is the initial, when I went for my post-op, blew me away a little bit.
How come?
Well, to see yourself, it was strange because these were my breasts that I had been aging with, right? Growing up with. They changed as I did. And you complain about them because they're not as firm. They're, look what happened. I was big, I was small, hormones. Yeah. But to see yourself in that way was like, I just actually, and I had, unfortunately, had to have a hysterectomy in my 40s due to an ovarian mass at that time. So my thinking is, my God, they're taking everything, every feminine part is being removed for one reason, all health, but for one reason or another. And I didn't feel whole for a short time, yet I knew it's what I needed to do to be healthy. So although I felt a good confidence that there's no question, and this cancer, I'm going at it the best I can, to see yourself like that is a little bit, it takes you back a little bit. I wasn't sure if I was going to reconstruct.
Really?
Yes, because I used to think before I became a cancer patient and while I was still married that it really, breasts didn't matter, right? They were lumps of fat and who cares? And some guys are breast people, some aren't. It's not that important. It doesn't define me. But I did feel I wanted to look like a woman. And I love this photo. And I'll tell you why I specifically love this photo. Because a butterfly represents change, new beginnings. And it's exactly what happens to you when you've been sick like this. It happens to you when you become a widow as well. So I've experienced both. And sometimes you feel you're not ready to be a butterfly, and then you are. So I wanted to look like a female to my children, to my grandchildren, and some of them were young. And I wanted to still look like me in my clothing. And for me, it was a personal decision, and it was cute because I had called that doctor I worked for, who remains in my life. And we used to have a joke because I would never be seen without my lipstick on. And I would say to her, if you don't do anything else, just make sure you have your lips. So when I called her, I said, do you think I should reconstruct? And she said, excuse me, you don't like to go out without your lips on. For some patients, that might be okay, but I think you'll want to reconstruct. And I found out so much about myself through the process.
What did you find out?
I found out that
you did this alone, didn't you?
I did it alone. Yes, I did stay at my daughter's the initial week after my mastectomy, but what had happened in the interim is I was in the process of planning an 80th birthday party for my mother, who, as you know, can be a difficult person. But this birthday party was 10 days after my mastectomy. So I was not going to cancel it. And I said, I think I can do this. I can still do this. So in knowing that my surgery was planned, I ran and got all the preparations done beforehand. My daughter-in-law graciously opened her home to the party. My aunt and my sisters were flying down. And my sister flew down to help me. And I went to the store. And what I did was thought to myself, okay, you're without breasts. It doesn't mean you're without your lips. We're still going to do our makeup. We're still going to cover our head. And I'm still going to put on my earrings, and I'm going to find clothing that makes me feel good, even without my breasts. So I did. I found a blouse that had a cute ruffle this way. I found shirts in Old Navy that had a ruffle along the top. And then I embraced what it felt like for that time. And I said, this is part of my journey. This is part of my journey. And I'm capable of doing this. And I had that party. And I have to say, I looked pretty good in the pictures. I had a beautiful blouse on. Everyone complimented. And it was okay. It was okay.
That is absolutely wonderful to hear. And I want to tell you something, Deb. This has gone so fast that we don't have a lot of time left. So I'm going to ask you to come back next week.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about caregiving, because I think this is so important. And I have to say, all the information you have given is wonderful for anybody who's going through this. But I'm going to ask you one final question. We've got a 3-minute warning coming up. I might have to cut you off real quick, but you'll forgive me. The next thing is what would you tell somebody who's just been diagnosed? What would you say?
For someone who's just been diagnosed, acknowledge your fear. Acknowledge your fear. You have every right to feel that. Live for today. Try not to anticipate. Don't go to tomorrow. Don't overthink it. But show yourself some grace. You will be filled with every emotion, and some you may not know you had. You'll be okay. It is scary. It's takes your breath away. You're not worried just for yourself. You're worried, cancer doesn't discriminate, as we know, right? You could be a young mom, you could be a new grandma, you could be a widow, you can be a child. Accept the fear. That fear strangely will help you. We are there. People like you and I, we are here to support you. There is lots of support out there, but don't push it away. Allow yourself to feel. That is so important. Once you do that, you'll then feel the strength. But fear sadly does come first, and you have to address it.
One thing I have to tell a quick story that you did for me was called Embrace the Suck.
Yes.
Embrace the Suck. And I remember very distinctly, and I still have the straws that you sent me a gift through the mail of straws to say, just embrace that suck, baby. And so you want to elaborate on that real quick, and then you're going to come back next week, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But cancer sucks. Okay. Yeah. Being diagnosed with cancer sucks. It has disrupted your life. You were on a course. You were taking care of your family. You were going to your job. How dare it come in and do this to you? But it sucks. And don't try to pretend it doesn't. So we embrace the suck. And that's our first step. We've embraced that suck. You do suck. Well, I don't like you. But now we're going to embrace it and work on that. And we will do it.
Deb, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience.
Well, thank you for having me.
You were eloquent as usual, and
I appreciate
kind and generous, and you're an angel.
Thank you. Wow.
You're an angel. And we're going to sign off now. And next week, I'm going to have Deb back because we're going to talk about caregiving because she just had so much to say. I'm
so sorry.
No. Don't you dare be sorry. Deb, you were amazing. And people have to hear this stuff. And this is our calling now, as you well know. We're going to share and we're going to make sure that people can get through this.
Yes. Okay. They learn to advocate for themselves, ask the questions, do your research. And I don't mean just any Google search out there because that can be some of the worst information. So building a good healthcare team is a great start. Yeah. Embracing the suck for yourself personally and knowing that this is your personal journey and it's not the same as someone else's, and acknowledge that.
Okay. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you.
Take care. I'll see you soon, okay?
Okay. You too. I love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We didn't get to half of what we wanted to talk about tonight, but Deb has promised me she's going to be back next week, and we are going to talk about caregiving. Thanks so much. Stay safe, and I'll see you next week.